and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. So Parliament has passed the Government Procurement Act, a law that Putrajaya says is key to preventing another scandal on the scale of 1MDB. And they say it will be to standardize procurement across federal and state levels. However, critics are warning of loopholes within the law that could invite abuse. So joining us on the show to discuss this further is Pushpan Murugiah, who is the CEO of the Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, or better known as the C4 Centre. Pushpan, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Let's get right into it. Talk to me a little bit about this, the iteration of the Government Procurement Bill that has now passed into legislation. What are your key concerns with this piece of law?
Hi, Melissa, and thanks for having me. Okay, I think first of all, I want to put it out there that there is a narrative going on that, civil society and MPs don't want this act. Actually, what we are is we are proponents for a particular public procurement act to regulate this particular area. But unfortunately, the act that was passed through recently is not the act that we can accept in any way, form, or matter. Why? Let me give you a few examples. First of all, the powers given to the minister is extremely wide. He can actually decide on any procurement with no upper limit ceiling. That's the first red flag we really have. Then if you look at the act, it does prescribe a procurement board, which is good. But again, the procurement board, if they come up with a decision, the discretion to accept or not is up to the minister. Again, powerful discretionary power, which makes it redundant in that sense. Then you have the oversight. Okay, there is another good point saying, yes, now we have tribunals for you to make a complaint if there's a grievances issue. Okay, that's good. But then we go back to the same problem. Who appoints the tribunal or sets up the procedure? It's the minister. So all this while, civil societies and MPs who have been fighting for the independence of institutions. For example, MACC, we want it to be independent. AG and PP, separation because there's issues of potential control. But in this particular case, the Act actually codifies the minister's power in so many areas that it gives such a wide discretionary powers, and it allows for executive to control the whole process. That's two. And the other more common problem we have also is now we have a Minister of Finance who is empowered here, but don't forget, he's also the Prime Minister. A double whammy is there. Right. And this gives us fear factor because look at Najib, he had both portfolio and what happened to them. 1MDB happened. So the anxiety is there, the fear factor is real. And one more important point I think for us C4 is very important. This act actually, in a way, allows for the codification of a crony list. Because in order to be a participant in the tenders, you have to be registered in a list, which is approved by authorizing body. And that authorizing body can allow or disallow you to be put in the list without giving any excuse or reasoning. Right. Which means it allows you now to have a crony list or codify a list that more is perhaps, you can become who are friends of yours, who are part of your political circles. So those concerns are very obvious in this particular act. And these are the few concerns that we actually have in terms of those acts.
Okay. Can I get deeper into them? So when you are talking about the expansion of power, or that you are concerned about the amount of power being held by a minister, are you referring to the finance minister specifically, or any minister? Okay, so one of the concerns, or one of the reasons for, or the rationale behind having this act was to curb ministerial power, so not to have political interference in terms of government procurement. Does this act not address that concern?
That is the narrative that's been sold. But unfortunately, the contents and details of the act actually does not reflect any of the spirit of the nature of the whole act. Now, those days when you do not have the act, all right, you have ministers who you have people in power who do control, give instructions. We all know that for a fact. We have no proof, but it happens. But the fact that it happens, we can't say much. But now, the fact that it's codified, you have an act that now codifies their powers, their discretion powers, and even if they do that in the future, there's no recourse or no excuse to say anything anymore. You are basically codifying all the bad practices that happened before this into an act and entrenching those practices. That's our concern.
So are you saying that, so the idea was that this law would help this our country prevent another 1MDB scandal? We never want to see a scandal of that scale again. C4 does not believe that this act will address the structural causes that allowed for those past abuses?
If and not, it will actually entrench those practices, and now onwards, you will not have any more recourse. As I've asked, I put this question forward to all the MPs who pass the act. Tell me, how does this particular act in this instance will solve your 1MDB or will stop the 1MDB? How would this act in any way stop your LCS? How would this act in any way stop your scoping scandal? If you realize that this act actually allows those contracts to go through and that scandal go through, you will realize how dangerous this particular act is.
Right. Could you, Pushpan, elaborate a little bit? So when you talked about the codification of a crony list, can you elaborate what you mean by that? What does this crony list actually entail? What does the law allow for?
Okay, it's a bit of, you have to do a little more analysis, but I'll try to make it as articulate as possible. So now, in order to participate in any government procurement, you have to be registered in a particular list to be eligible to participate. Now, in order to be in that list, you have to get the approval of an authorizing body. All right. That authorizing body, it can be the minister that gives you the contract, which is the Minister of Finance. For example, this example is Minister of Finance. So they can approve whoever that sits on a particular list. All right. Now, if, for example, you have a company that wants to be in the list, but he has got alignment to maybe opposition party or people who are not in favor of the government, that authorizing body can reject his application to be in that list. Which means, in other words, if he abuses his power to the full extent, all he has to do is approve people that they are comfortable with, his cronies, political alignments. Those companies will be parked in the list to be eligible for government contracts. So in that sense, it allows for setting up of a crony list.
Right. I'm just wondering, so some politicians, former politicians, have also kind of responded to the Government Procurement Act. Rafizi is someone who's been quite vocal about it. And he says that this is a good law, but it shouldn't have been bulldozed through Parliament. Should we be reading into the process and the speed through which it was passed, that entire process? Should we be concerned about it? Do you agree with Rafizi, Pushpan?
No, personally, I don't agree with Rafizi. And I think, again, personally, the reason why it was bulldozed is because it actually gives a lot of powers to the minister. That is the reason why it bulldozed so quickly. Let me contextualize for you. In Malaysia, the biggest problem we have is corruption. It's so endemic, it's entrenched in our system, in our political structure, in our bureaucracy. It's the biggest problem, all right? And yet, the law that's supposed to address our biggest problem was passed within 3.5 days. You put it on Monday, and then on Thursday afternoon, you have passed an act that's supposedly to deal with our biggest problem. That is the concern that I have. I mean, how can you do that? And also bear in mind, this may be a little bit more conspiracy in that sense, but at that particular time, the URA was already put out there. Bill was already out there. Everybody is discussing. We don't agree with it. Everybody is discussing about it. That out of the blue, you have a Public Procurement Act sneaking into the table to be tabled quietly. So, I mean, it may sound conspiracy, but I think it gives a fear factor. It's such a powerful bill to deal with our biggest problem was done in such an quietly, secretive, and very fast approval method to get it done. It's a bit of cause of a concern. And in fact, MPs from both sides, government and opposition and civil society, we're not saying don't go through. Hold on, change, strengthen it, make it more powerful and really useful. Then you go through. That is
Right.
our only demand. Yeah.
So could you also elaborate what change what specifically? If there was still a chance to amend the bill, what changes would you insist upon?
Now, I think initially what we wanted was to see how we can limit the participation or the control or the influence of the executive. That is our biggest concern in any of our government issues or public interest issues, is how the executive controls the entire process. That has to be controlled. That has to be limited. No, we're not saying the executive cannot function, cannot do their work. They have to, but they have to be independent oversight mechanism, independent processes, clear and transparent procurement processes that actually help the nation go through development in the proper way. Not where the minister has so wide powers that he can do whatever he wants. That is not a bill that we want.
Okay. And given that the act has actually passed, do you think what happens now? Is it too late? Is there still an opportunity for citizens, activists like yourself, parliamentarians, to be vigilant, or to what can we do to safeguard from abuse?
Yeah, I mean, first point, I hope this message goes through to all MPs. MPs, please, you represent the interests of the people. Do not have party interest first instead of people's interest. This bill does not prevent corruption. It actually entrenches a lot of issues. So please be truthful when you want to explain to the constituency what is the context of the bill. And I think going forward, there are a few things we can do. One is we really ask for the government to expressly commit that they will amend those extensively wide powers and amend it in such a way that there's a lot of consultation with us to make it into a much more workable act. That's one. Perhaps going forward, they can have a special independent commission to see how to implement and also come up with regulations and codes under the act that will actually strengthen the independence of those institutions and try to make it much more workable in that sense. So there are some things we can do, but we have to have our engagement, CSOs, academics to come together and see how to build a stronger framework on top of what has been passed.
All right. Pushpan, thank you so much for highlighting these concerns. We appreciate your time. Pushpan Murugiah from the C4 Centre. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more on the Government Procurement Act after this. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about the newly passed Government Procurement Act, which the government insists will bring transparency and reform to the procurement process, the public procurement process. However, skeptics fear that the law doesn't go far enough. Joining me on the show to help us think this through is Sri Murniati Yusuf, who is a senior fellow at the think tank Ideas Malaysia, where she is a specialist in public financial management, procurement, and the governance of state-owned enterprises. Murniati, welcome to the show. It's good to have you back. I'm curious to know, given your extensive background research on public procurement, what is your overall assessment of the Government Procurement Act as it was passed in Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara?
Well, I didn't follow the Dewan Negara debate in detail, and the Hansard isn't out yet. So I understand the bill went through without amendment in both houses. So the concern raised by many of us when it was tabled in Dewan Rakyat several weeks ago is still very much valid. So I think I share concerns. The main concerns, I think, this is an op-ed that I wrote with Dr. Rahana. the act is designed with the wrong center of gravity. It puts heavy emphasis on and almost dangerous on enforcement, while leaving the root causes of procurement weaknesses largely untouched, in my opinion. And one of the things I think maybe other organizations highlight is the extraordinary powers under the act given to authorized officers from the Treasury to seize and search without warrants. I mean, yes, we know that compliance have been problem, violations of the rules have been problematic, and that causes many wastage and, you know, in our spending. But I think that's not the answer to it. Having a very broad power like that, and it's given to Treasury, I think we put the responsibility in the wrong hands.
All right. Only if I may cite that op-ed you referenced just now, the op-ed that you co-wrote. When you talk about the wrong center of gravity, you said that the law was built on this problematic assumption that it was about compliance. In fact, you alluded to the fact that there are so many circulars. And this is part of the conversations that we've been having on Consider This as well. Talk to me a little bit about why you think that this is the wrong center of gravity and what the assumption or what the foundations of the bill should have been.
I think what emerged from our consultation before is we have extensive circulars. Can you imagine when you read this book, 600 to 800 pages of circulars? And I think I understand that they don't want to repeat these so long circulars as law. However, there are certain things that could be elevated. For example, the principles, transparency, what else? Competition. These are very important principles that should not be left out. And I think that Dr. Rohana's point is right now, value for money. If you see the law, the core principle is not stated at all, which is, for me, is something that we miss. And then transparency is in every law, procurement law, transparency is very important. So mandating it in the law that you should disclose, and these are the things that need to be disclosed, is very important. Right now, we don't say that at all. It's just, okay, publish, but you know, the requirements or the what needs to be published left out in the circulars. So those are the missing points. Another thing was the procurement methods, which is right now, yes, we state that it should be competitive, I think in one of the sections, but it's not enough because the remaining of the procurement methods are left to the ministers to decide, which is now actually in many circulars. In other jurisdictions, these are put in the laws precisely because we want to have consistency. That when you choose to move from open tender to other method of procurement, there are reasons, and the reasons are being decided by laws instead of administrative circulars, which is actually internal. So yeah, these are about actually circulars meant for internal purposes. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So these are the things that I think right now missing the point. Yeah.
Murniati, you on previous shows have highlighted the concentration of discretionary power in the hands of ministers. So, and political influence in the procurement process. I'm wondering how we should think about the role of the Treasury, the role of the Ministry of Finance now, because one of the justifications for this procurement bill in its current iteration was the fact that it would minimize interference or discretionary power in the hands of ministers in public procurement. Does it truly address that concern?
It's actually, I feel the bill is a little bit vague in this matter. So one, Section 38 said, say further prohibit interference in procurement process. No person shall directly or indirectly intervene. Intervene meaning that it's not only the result, but also to change the procurement process. say suddenly from open tender, you intervene, you want to change it to direct negotiation. That's also intervention. And that's what we are seeing happening. So that is now being considered as an offense. In fact, you are liable to 5 years imprisonment, which is good. On the other hand, the bill gives the power to minister to not be bound by the decision of procurement board. To if the board cannot decide, the decision can be made by the minister. So these are, in the past, is not being seen as something that you should do, but now it's legalized by the law. And when I wrote the paper on direct negotiation, we are seeing that this act in which the minister ignored the recommendation procurement board, exactly what leads to some problems in the project.
Right.
So now we have it as something that legalized by the act. So
okay, one of the other justifications was that this is how the government will prevent future scandals, scandals on the size and the scale of 1MDB. Do you think that's true, that this act tackles those specific governance failures that had enabled past cases like that?
Look, if we see cases before, I think many of us would feel a lot of doubt on that statement. But look, I believe that this is made of out of a good intention. So let's see whether this actually works. But in the past, as I said, cases where projects are being delayed, you change so many contractors. Some of it is because the minister did not bound by the decision by procurement board. So, and then some ministers just decide without consulting the procuring authority. So these are the cases in which we saw before. But let's see, hopefully, things are different with the new act, or maybe minister will be more careful in using this that is now being legalized in the act. So let's see.
Well, you've been studying this for a long time, Oni. Do you think the understanding is there amongst us Malaysians? Do we understand why it is that we should care about procurement law? It sounds like a dry topic, but could the government have communicated how it affects our daily lives, our tax money going forward? Do you think we have an understanding, a public understanding about it?
I agree with you. This is a very dry topic. But look, schools, hospitals, most of the public facilities are built because we have procurement process. So if we have our procurement process sound, free of corruption, accountable, and this could be one of it to facilitate this is through having a good procurement law, then we should care about it, because most of the services that we acquire, remember the cases of, during COVID, the ventilator, on all these things, these are procurement activities. And if we have a better rules on this, in which abuse of power interventions being minimized, then hopefully in the long run, wastages, corruption related to procurement will be minimized, and we get a better service, for our daily lives, right? From health services to education services.
Absolutely. So you said that we'll have to kind of wait and see how this law is being implemented. What are you, as a researcher specializing in procurement and public finance management, what are you going to be watching? What are you going to be vigilant about?
I think there are many things that needs to be established, right? Say, for example, the tribunal. I would love to see whether this is really something that our contractors or people who are watching procurement actually use it to. One of the purpose of tribunals is to ensure that procurement process are being followed, and then contractors who are not happy with the process, they can submit complaints, see whether whether this is actually being used, and who are the members, right? we would love to see that. And then we have the new thing called registers office. I know that right now MOF has some registration office for contractors, but right now it's being elevated as an institution in the Act. So I want to see how that happens. And of course, the one that I mentioned before, how actually Treasury really going to be a sort of police in the procurement process, right? Not only how they are going to do it, but how much resources are they going to put in this? I mean, I would imagine that if I'm now like a staff at the Treasury, suddenly you have a power to actually seize and warrant, to search and seize, to search and seize. So all these things have institutional implication. And I think I would love to see how this Act will be implemented.
Right.
Yeah. Just one more thing. I think one equally important thing that we need to see is the parliamentary oversight. I think I always talk about this simply because in the last one of the things that was actually missed from this point is the scrutiny by the Parliamentary Select Committee, which actually now, according to the standing order, actually is they're supposed to do it before it goes to the committee level and being passed. But they didn't do it. Right. So since they missed that opportunity, maybe they would be more vigilant during the implementation period. So they will be able to review and see whether, there are unintended consequences, and maybe recommending refinements if gaps and things, we see some gaps in the implementation.
Right.
So I think those my hopes. Let's remain optimistic. This thing will really, have a good impact on our procurement process.
The eternal optimist, Uni. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Sri Murniati Yusuf from Think Tech Ideas Malaysia, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.